Hello everyone, my name is Captain Jack and welcome back to the channel. Today we're discussing Space Engineers, but more specifically we're discussing DLC. So the Decorative Pack DLC arrived to the game on Monday and yeah, it was an interesting time. We've now got brand new blocks in the form of DLC, so you have to pay like a small fee to unlock these blocks, and a bit of a controversial subject it is. Overall, the idea of DLC within Space Engineers has been received quite well. I was actually quite surprised at the positive outlook by most of the players towards the idea of having to pay for content within the game. I think coupled with the type of content we're getting, plus the small price which the developers have introduced, has actually made people more open to, the idea of getting DLC for the game. And so far, most people I've seen have actually picked it up. Overall, I'd say 80% are liking the idea of DLC, while 20%, I'd say 10% are maybe not, and 10% are strongly not liking it. That's what I've observed around social media, such as Facebook, Reddit, Twitter, etc., and Discord so far. And I'm quite happy at this. When I was taught about DLC for Space Engineers around about a month ago, I was quite shocked at the idea of having, paid content coming to the game. And one thing I didn't want, and I advised the developers on, is to not split or segregate the community, as that would have been bad for the whole game. For me, Space Engineers is a sandbox game at its heart, no matter whether you want to take it survival or creative, etc. And building with your friends is a massive part of it for me since I've started playing in 2013, and always will be for as long as I play this game. I have to build with my friends. I just love it. And you see why I do that through series like Colony Wars and Survival and such like that. So if this DLC made it so friends who didn't have it couldn't connect to the servers, I probably might have not played the game much anymore because it's locking people off. I don't have to tell my friend, oh sorry, you have to go and buy X amount of content to be able to come play on the server, because that would just be bad and stupid in my opinion. So massive thank you to Keen Software House, the developers, for listening to our feedback on the subject of not segregating the community with the idea of DLC. So, the topic of this video today is to basically discuss DLC. I'm going to be saying that word quite a lot. It being in the game, future content, and whether it's a big deal or not. Straight off the bat, it is a big deal, because having to pay for content in a game which you've already paid for is a big thing to a lot of people. Myself, I don't like spending extra money on something I already bought. If I go out and buy a new phone, I don't want to have to buy an X amount, to use it 2 months down the line or something like that. That would be stupid, and I probably wouldn't, buy off that company again. But in gaming, DLC is a common thing now. Every game carries DLC primarily. I mean, if you're a fan of Paradox games, you're probably used to it, to be honest. I own Stellaris, and I think I've bought all the expansion packs, which is probably over £100 at this point, just off the top of my head. That's quite expensive. So in comparison, Space Engineers charging DLC at £2.89 or £3.99 isn't a big deal. It's about a price of a coffee if I go down to Costa later today. Now, one thing I did want to make note of in this video is the price of the DLC, particularly compared to the price of the game. When I started playing Space Engineers back in 2013, I think I must have picked up the game from anywhere between £12 to £18. It definitely wasn't the price it was today, because the price did rise at one point, and now they've brought it back down. That comes me in here. I bought the game for around about £13 or something like that, and I have put 3,000 hours into the game so far. I think I've got my money's worth in Space Engineers, and I think a lot of other people have as well. They've definitely got their money's worth putting into the game. If you compare it to how many hours you've paid, or how many hours you've played, compared to what you paid, I think you'll find you've definitely got your money's worth. If you're easily over 100 hours, I'd say yeah, you're probably there by now. Compared to a AAA game such as Anthem, Battlefield 5 or Battlefront 2, which I paid £60 to £70 for, some of them I've definitely not got my money's worth in, particularly Anthem at the minute, but that's a topic for another video. And you can see here, £20, which is the current price of Space Engineers, to get 3,000 hours of content for myself. I don't mind paying an extra $3.99 for a bit of DLC into the game to support the developers who have given me so many hours of enjoyment. And that's what a lot of people are saying. They are happy to support the developers who have given them so many hours of enjoyment. Myself, 3,000 hours. My friend Kraz, I think he's got 2,500 hours. Everyone has their own set of hours inside Space Engineers, and I think a lot of people can safely say they have got their money's worth in the game. Now, the benefit of this is DLC allows the developers to continually support the game. You may be thinking, but Jack, how does that work? Well, basically, when Space Engineers released last month, that was the final push for it to sell to a new audience. After that, the game isn't going to get exposed to new audiences, and it won't have that same boost where it's going to appear on the Steam store and things like that. The game's not going to double release again next year. That's not going to happen. The idea behind it is that was the release there, that was their final big push to get as many sales in as for the game. Thinking about it as a business and logistically, having more DLC allows them to continue supporting the game, else they'd have to move on to another project. Once released, they'd be able to do a few hotfixes and stuff like that, but there'd be no be no idea doing free content updates for a game which is no longer selling. You may think, oh, but that sucks, they should continue start selling stuff like that, or we continue updating it. Yes, they'd continue updating it, but you wouldn't see new and fresh content like this, in my opinion, because they wouldn't be able to make money off it. And yes, not everything does revolve around money, but when you're a game developer, you have to concern yourself about money as well. You've got a studio to pay for, developers to pay for, and to make sure you can afford everything. Because if you can't pay your devs, there's no game at the end of the day. If they probably didn't release DLC, I expect we'd see a few micro hotfixes, maybe one content update such as what we've just got with the replay tool and the LCD thing, but I expect they'd start working on a new game straight away. Personally, I don't know if Keen are working on a new game right now. I wasn't shown or told anything while I was at the office, so we'll have to wait and see until they make another announcement. Regarding future content and DLC, I've actually got a more in-depth video coming on this within the next week, so stay tuned for that. If you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe, by the way, to watch that video. Future content. DLC is definitely going to be a part of that. But one thing I spoke about with Marek, who's the CEO of Keen Software House, when I was there at the offices, is that he wants to keep the idea of free content and paid content at the same time. So every time that an update rolls around for Space Engineers, if you're not a fan of DLC and strongly do not want to buy it, then you don't have to. You're still going to get free content each time with each game update. I am a massive supporter of this. That means everyone wins, in my opinion. You're going to get something even if you don't want to pay for the DLC this time around. Now, one of the big criticisms of DLC within Space Engineers is the common phrase of, oh, but there's just a mod on the workshop for it. Yes, of course there's a mod on the workshop for it. I don't think anyone's denying the fact there is not good mods out there. And hats off to the talented modding community of the Space Engineers world, because I've played with their mods for years. One of my iconic builds, the RDI Defender, has a hollow table on the bridge by Riptide, and I think that was brought around in DX9 days, so probably 2014 onwards. And I've used that block right up until 2019, and will still use it past here. I will still use many decorative mods for my starships from now on. The new DLC doesn't change things, in my opinion, for what I can build in Space Engineers. Or it doesn't change things for what I can build on mods in Space Engineers, should I say. I'm still going to use mods in the game, and I don't think the developers are saying you shouldn't use decorative mods. Use them. Couple them with the DLC pack. It makes them more interesting and creative builds. At the end of the day, Space Engineers is a creative building game. Mods help you be more creative as well as the DLC pack, so go out there and combine the two. I bet you, with combining mods and the DLC pack, you can create awesome things. But back onto the original topic, you're asking, should I buy the DLC when I can just mod it? If you want to support the developers, the easy answer is yes. In my opinion, and this is my own opinion here, I'm not being told to say this by Keen or anyone else, I think if you want to support Keen Software House the developers into making Space Engineers a better game, buy the DLC. If you don't want to support them, or you can't afford it, or you just don't want the DLC, then don't buy it. They're not forcing you into it, the game isn't locking you out. The only criticism I have about the DLC in terms of locking players out is access to the Industrial Cockpit. In my personal opinion, you should maybe be able to access the Industrial Cockpit, but not the other blocks. But I think the way Keen have done it in a way you can see the DLC blocks but not interact with them is actually a fair point and allows you to play the game a lot better. Now, overall, is DLC bad? No, not really. In my opinion, as long as the price stays low and the content stays good, I am happy to support the idea of Keen Software House having DLC within Space Engineers. If we're going to get future content updates like we've had today, I see no issue with that. The latest Space Engineers update brought a whole host of new features with it. We had the replay tool and the LCD customization for free players, and then we have the DLC for people who want to pick it up. In future, if this is something we're going to get, I fully support this idea and can't wait to see more future content within Space Engineers. Players are already thinking and suggesting what they'd next like to see as a DLC pack for the game. Something like skins or decals would personally be good for me. Hey, maybe I can get an RDI one in the pack, that'd be quite funny. But to round that off there, I'm quite impressed with the DLC with Space Engineers. Like I say, as long as they don't go OTT with it, like some game dev studios, this is what a lot of people have been saying. If they keep it fair and trade, and we're going to get maybe 2 more DLCs this year, or 3, pushing it, then I would be perfectly fine with that. But if we're going to get a DLC every month, I think that's taking the piss slightly. I'm sorry to say that, but I think that would be trying to, milk the community too much. I say we probably won't see another DLC for another 2 months, maybe somewhere in July maybe. That might be a good idea for the next wave of DLC for Space Engineers. I'm not sure. What do you think about that? Let me know your opinions and thoughts on this subject down below in the comments. I'm happy to discuss it with you and what you think about the game and the idea of paid for content coming to the game a bit more. Personally, I'm excited to see what comes of the game. Marek the dev has already spoken about what future content might be coming to Space Engineers in the terms of a trading system and new weapons. Of course, they're going to take their time with weapons, as they have to find out if they can do that as paid content or not. Because when you start opening up a can of worms like that, you kind of have to take into balancing and whether it be fair. Of course, if you're a free player, you don't want to end up being destroyed by somebody who's paid for DLC. It goes down the pay to win sort of line, and that isn't fun for anyone. But yeah, that does kind of round up my video here on thoughts on Space Engineers DLC. I just wanted to share some of my thoughts with you today on what I think about the subject, as many of you were asking. They asked my opinion on DLC when I was there at the Keen Development Studio back last month, and I was visibly shocked at the idea of DLC coming to Space Engineers, but overall, I'm happy with the way they've implemented it. The price I was originally told was going to be a little bit higher, not too much higher, don't get carried away, but I'm glad they decided to lower it. And of course, they lowered the price of the main game as well, so you are actually getting your money's worth in my opinion. Overall, if you buy the game now and the DLC, I think you spend about £25 on total, which was the original price of Space Engineers about 6 months ago. So you are saving money and not being that expensive overall, to be honest. And if you look at the price of a AAA game, you're not doing too bad in my opinion. But yep, that's my opinion on DLC. I hope you enjoyed the video today, and if you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. I've got plenty more Space Engineers videos on its way soon, including one about what future DLC might look like. Stay tuned for that video landing next week. In the meantime, I've been Captain Jack. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Goodbye.